So he systematically takes them through, and we've already looked at women energized by grace are reverent in their behavior. If they're not walking in the Spirit, they're not reverent. If they are walking in the Spirit, they are reverent. Women energized by grace are not slanderers. If they're walking in the Spirit, their tongue is guarded. If they're not walking in the Spirit, their tongue is loose and bedeviled, as the word is he used. Women energized by grace are not given to much wine. They just don't do excessive things. Women energized by grace are teachers of good things. Women energized by grace are discipling younger women. And as we saw last time, women, and especially wives energized by grace, love their husbands. They just decide to make their husband their number one priority. They start seeking his friendship, and they examine their lifestyle to be focused on him. But then, look at verse 4. Those mothers, women who are mothers energized by grace, love their children. And I showed you that it says in verse 4 that they are to be phileo teknon. They are to be, and the literal word is, close friendship, enjoying friendship. Just like Jesus and Lazarus and Jesus and John and Jesus and his church. They're supposed to be enjoying a close friendship, emotional relationship with their children. That phileo love that is emotional and close and visible is what the Lord asks from grace-energized mothers. And so what I'd like to do is talk about how to give the priceless gift of love to your children. And let me just share kind of a collection of 30 years of thought. And I look back in these last weeks doing Titus over everything, because I take notes on everything I do. I've looked over everything that I've ever learned and studied about this, and I just kind of rambled it together. So let me show you a collection of things from the Scriptures. Do your loved ones in your family feel your love? That's a question we all need to ask. Do they feel your love? Not do you have agape, dutiful, sacrificial love, but do you have phileo, emotional, felt love? That's a question that we all need to ask. Just as many husbands think that their wives admire other men more than they are loved and admired, because a wife will say, so-and-so's husband does this and that with his children and his wife, and immediately those husbands don't feel the love and admiration of their wife. They feel that she thinks more highly of someone else than them because they're compared. And likewise, many wives feel their husbands think other women are either better at caring for their husbands or prettier or better at caring for their families than they are. Those women do not feel the love of their husbands. But most importantly, for Titus 2 mothers, energized by grace, we need to consider that many children hurt because they sense their parents don't even like them. They kind of have this feeling. Some ways that a lack of love can harm children where they feel it is when a struggling student watches their parents gloat about their brother or sister's good grades. They immediately feel less because of the comparison. Or maybe a boy in some athletic event doesn't do so well and looks up and immediately notices his father's disappointment because the father is the great athlete and he's hoping his son will be the great athlete that he wants him to be. They don't feel love. The absence of loving approval can lead to a lot of pain, whereas those who are loved and face their daily challenges in the world that they live in, they face it with the strength and confidence of someone loving them. You say, are you sure? Aren't we just supposed to slug it out and be good soldiers and not worry about that stuff? Well, I thought about that a long time, especially in our culture. It seems like we're never supposed to talk about anything that has to do with emotions and how people feel and all that. We're just supposed to kind of tough it out. Well, I want to show you someone that had a lot of problems. His name was Timothy. Look at 1 Timothy 1. And I want to take you to show you how Paul loved his son Timothy. You know what's so funny? If we show all this in a biblical context, no one gets uncomfortable. But if we talk about it from the studies of many people that have analyzed other people, people get uncomfortable. So let me show you, they both come to the same place. The love that can be felt is a priceless gift that is very biblical to give. And we can see that modeled by the Apostle Paul. Paul loved his son in the faith. So as our example, how was Paul's love for Timothy, his son in the faith, expressed? How did Paul, who picked up young Timothy on his missionary journeys, how did Paul express to that young man, whom he called his son in the faith, his love? Well, it's one of the most beautiful testimonies to the power of encouragement or affirmation in the New Testament, and it's from the life of Paul. In 1 Timothy 1:2, and let me just give you a quick list. If we looked at Paul's relationship with Timothy, the first thing we'd see is that Paul affirmed him in many ways. Now, if you know anything about Timothy, he seemed to be weak in constitution. He was often infirm. People looked down on him. Let no man despise thy youth. He also was one who cried a lot. Paul said, I'm aware of your tears, and it wasn't like it was a one-time occasion. So it seems like Timothy had people picking on him. He was a weakling or sickling or something, and he cried a lot. And also he was a mama's boy. We never hear about his dad. We only hear about his mother and his grandmother. And so, you put that together and you could get a lot of mileage out of that at school. They probably played jump rope with the girls, instead of, playing tree climbing with the boys. And so whatever was going on, Timothy needed something, and Paul gave it to him. The first thing he says, look what he says in verse 2. To Timothy, a true son in the faith. Now that is a magnificent encouragement. Paul said, you're a true son. Keep going. Look at chapter 4 and verse 12. He told Timothy he was, 1 Timothy 4:12, an example to the flock. He says, let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word and conduct, in love and spirit and faith and purity. He says, Timothy, you're a true son. Timothy, you're an example to the flock, the way you live. And I'm sure Timothy thought about that. Verse 14. Same chapter. He told Timothy he had a gift. He says, Timothy, 1 Timothy 4:14, do not neglect the gift that is in you, which was given to you by prophecy with the laying on of the hands of the eldership. In fact, he says in 2 Timothy 1:6, you need to stir it up. He says, you're gifted. You have a gift. God gave you a gift. You know what the scriptures say? We all have a gift. We all, if we're saved, are true sons in the faith. We all are an example to someone, either a good or a bad. You see, what Paul was saying, we can say, and how encouraging it is. He reminded him in 2 Timothy 3:15 of his incredible spiritual heritage, and that from a child you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation. He reminded him of his spiritual heritage that he had from his youth. 1 Timothy 5:23, though, Paul was careful not to belittle Timothy for his weaknesses. A lot of times people use humor, what they think is funny. When the person's not laughing, it's not a joke. It's harmful to them. So Paul, you notice in 1 Timothy 5:23, he doesn't belittle Timothy for his weaknesses. In fact, he says, no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities. In fact, in 2 Timothy 1:4, he had frequent tears, not just frequent infirmities. 2 Timothy 1:4, greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of your tears. Paul says, I remember your tears. And when I see you, I'm going to be filled with joy. Paul never belittled him. Rather, he told him, 1 Timothy 6:20, that he had a treasure entrusted to him. O Timothy, guard what was committed to your trust. He says, you have a treasure, and that God is going to use you and reward you. 2 Timothy 4:8, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. The Lord, the righteous judge, is going to give me, and not me only, but also to all who love his appearing. He was saying, Timothy, you have this giftedness, and even though you're struggling with your weakness, he says, I'm not going to make fun of that. I'm going to say this, that you should stir up that gift, and you should guard the treasure, the gospel call that you've been given. So Paul loved Timothy with the love that he could feel. Paul affirmed Timothy. He used tender and encouraging words. And if you read 1st, 2nd Timothy, you find one of the most tenderest, loving expressions of a father to a son to help him in his faith. These exhortations were tenderly given to a struggling young man.